Okay, so Human Hope Familia, I have my new friend, Dan Allender, on with me. Dan, thank you so much for jumping in and having a conversation with me and a couple thousand of my friends.
Carlos, it's such an honor to be with you.
Oh, thanks so much. So listen, here's the thing. The first time that I kind of started following your work, I was going through a really difficult season in my life, and this was probably 2014, 2015. And I'd been following the work of John Eldredge for a long time, and he, maybe it was in a newsletter, I don't know, this was 2014, maybe he was still mailing things in the mail that I may have opened up on my kitchen table. But it was an invitation to a conference that I need to tell you, and everyone else listening, I've only ever paid to go to one conference in my life. I normally go and speak at conferences. I'm asked to, I saw this and I said, I'm buying a plane ticket, and I flew to Colorado Springs, and I walked into this big church with a bunch of flags and things kind of hanging on and it was you and John did this. I can't remember what it was called. It was something of the heart or,
Restoration of the heart.
That was it. That was it. And so there I sat all alone in a pew in the back, sobbing my eyes out while you and John did something during those few days for me that was so beneficial to my life. What you did is you aligned for me the fact that there can be inner healing prayer and like all the things that my church was telling me that I needed to do to get help, but also talk therapy and psychologists and all these things. And suddenly I found myself in a room with what seemed like to me for so long in my head, it was like, oh, these are two enemies when it comes to how to get things done in healing and trauma. But suddenly I'm in a place where no, we were actually doing things together. Do you remember that conference? And maybe tell me a little bit about kind of the heart behind what happened in those few days.
Yeah, I love that time. I love playing with John and the privilege of being in that context, essentially talking about the reality that trauma certainly is somatic, certainly psychological, but the reality of living in a fallen world is that nobody can escape something of the effects on their heart with, for, and at times against God. And so that reality of we don't have to make these deep distinctions, these radical distinctions between our mental health, our spiritual health, and in a sense, our body health. So it was great joy. Now, on the other hand, I have to admit that I knocked a candle over and almost lit the church on fire. So, when I think about that conference, it was great. I really, really enjoyed it, other than I almost burned the church down.
Other than the candle, that is amazing. It's so good. So, at that conference, for me, there was a realization that that I had gone through trauma. And I think trauma is a word that many people disassociate from, or they hear it and they think to themselves, I don't know, like I've never been in a car accident. I've never been, sexually abused. And so suddenly I think people discount the fact that trauma has happened to all of us. Can you maybe start at a baseline level and help us understand what trauma is and how possibly it has entertained all of our lives?
Yeah, such a good question, because you're so right. Like the big T traumas seem like, well, to some degree, foreign for a lot of people. But the fact is, look, we live in a fallen world, and we live east of Eden. And death alone, if you've had anyone that matters to you die, then you already know something of what trauma brings. So trauma is any disruption, any disintegration of shalom. So when you go through a divorce, when your good friend goes through a divorce, when you see heartache and injustice, global, local, you're in the face of trauma. So you don't even have to experience something directly to have the effects of trauma. So anytime there is this shattering of shalom, you've got the beginning of trauma. And then when you experience that with some degree of powerlessness, meaning you can't affect the trajectory of what this trauma is bringing to you and to others. And in that, the natural response for most of us is to, in the fragmentation, to get numb, to sort of shut down. And then what often happens is some degree of isolation. So those three factors, the shattering, the numbing, the isolation, those are pretty key factors to any form of the shattering of shalom.
Wow. Can you unpack those words, those three words, the shattering of shalom? Okay. So say for instance, I do have a lot of listeners that may have never even heard the word shalom. Can you unpack that a little bit and what that means?
Yeah, shalom is a Hebrew word that basically means peace. But here's the problem. Most of us think of peace as an absence of tension or conflict, like peace out, buddy.
Right.
And you go, no, shalom is way more like really complex, sweet jazz, where you've got tension, complexity, yet it somehow comes together in a way in which it takes your breath away. So to be in the presence, I saw Michael Jordan play in Chicago. That's an experience of shalom. To watch Baryshnikov dance is an experience. To be in the presence of beauty that takes your breath away, that's the experience of shalom. And what happens with trauma, if we can just be a little boring here, is that portion of our brain and our left frontal lobe, particularly in an area called Broca's area, basically goes offline. That's the part of our brain that manages language. So part of the shattering of shalom is we can't think well. We can't reason well. So if I were to get news, as I did about 2 months ago, that a dear friend died, I was in a hotel room and my wife called me and said, Len died. And I heard the words. I know her language, but I could not let in that instant the reality that a dear friend had just died. And when it came, she said it again, Len died. I literally collapsed. My body fragmented. I could not hold the data of this shalom being shattered. And that sense of fragmentation is literally, we don't think well, we don't manage what's happening inside of us well. And as I said, our natural instinct is to shut down even relationally. So the people who could most be of help to us in that context often are the people we shut out. So trauma, I hate to put it this quickly, but trauma is evil's friend. Evil loves trauma because when we get shattered, we lose trust. When we numb, we lose hope. And when we isolate, we literally cut ourselves off from love.
Wow. When we numb, we lose. So trauma happens. It could be, again, a moment of trauma for you. You hear this from your wife. You collapse to the ground. Immediately, what somebody would do is not think, okay, I need to deal with my trauma. Our body and our minds automatically just start dealing with the trauma, regardless of our intention. And the way that you're telling me that happens is suddenly we're like, okay, what can I do to make the feeling that I'm feeling go away?
Oh,
that's the numbing step, right?
Yes. And at one level, it's a gift from God that actually we're not going to feel everything in that one moment. So in some ways, the fragmentation makes it harder to move. The numbing makes it harder to feel. But what often happens, and this is the tragedy, that we learn early in life as 3, 5-year-olds, 8-year-olds, 12-year-olds, that we developed a unconscious way of resolving or dealing with trauma. So we learned at a deep level, boys don't cry. Or uniquely, your family taught you that any form of weakness would be punished more than boys don't cry. You will be even hurt more if you cry. So we each learned structures that become systems in our own body that we can manage the world if we just make a joke of it, or we just like move on to the next thing, or just be immobilized by it. But whatever structure is, it was an adaptive means by which we came to survive. And we need to bless that because it did keep us alive. Yet on the other hand, as often is the case, what we use to survive ends up keeping us from thriving. And that is the hard work of stepping into our trauma, not to damn it, not to hate it, but in many ways to learn from it. And that we don't do. We don't do in the church. We don't do in our educational system. Sometimes we get to do it in therapy, but a lot of times even therapists tend not to want to engage their own trauma, therefore not yours.
Oh my gosh. Oh, okay. So hold on. My brain just went 40 different places in your 60-second response there, because okay, so let me go here. When somebody, trauma happens and we think of numbing. So I think automatically where people go is like the kind of the dirty numbing, right? Like the drinking or the porn or the, artificial intimacy, whatever it may be. But some people, maybe their version, maybe they're thinking, well, I'm not numbing, Carlos and Dan. Like I've just moved on. I'm like, okay, that happened. So I'm going to go work now. I'm going to go get my head and get my mind off of it. And so talk to us about the danger of maybe you don't have that kind of dirty, hairy, scary looking numbing problem, but yours is work, or yours is something that maybe the world would be like, oh, hey, this is great. Like the world's giving you a round of applause because something traumatic happened in your life. You are now working so hard, and look, this guy's pouring himself into his work. Talk to us about the dangers of that middle section of trauma, of that numbing and detaching, even if it's not an ugly looking sin.
Let me just say, this is why it's so much fun to be with you. That's just a brilliant question, because most of us do have a history of dirty numbing at some point, and maybe we quote unquote grew out of it into healthier ways to engage. And again, I'm not wanting to say that looking forward, being persistent, resilient it's a lovely gift. So we're having to actually hold a certain nuance that a lot of beautiful things also have brokenness. A lot of broken things have some real beauty. But if we can just say the inability to truly mourn. Okay, you have this phrase from Jesus's Beatitudes where it's a pretty stunning, number of thoughts, but where he goes, blessed. Like, okay, really? Blessed are those who mourn. And you go, no, that's not my experience, baby. Totally. Blessed are those who mourn. And here's the next phrase, and they will be comforted. Well, that's the very core of what fragmentation and numbing bring, is a lack of ability to be comforted. So when you end up comforting yourself, you can do that, but it's not the same as the comfort of others. So, all right, we talked a little bit about trauma and the brain. Let's just say that the brain, when you're in trauma, begins to produce something called stress biochemicals. And we know those as cortisol, adrenaline, noradrenaline, catecholamines, a bunch of stuff that basically ramps you up, ramps you to flee, ramps you to fight, or even to shut down. But what happens is that those stress biochemicals usually last. Like if you get enraged, a road rage, you're going to be high on cortisol for 8 hours, meaning everything else you do for 8 hours is going to be affected by those stress biochemicals just running through your body.
8 hours.
8 hours. And it's going to affect you. Now, again, not the same at the 7th, 8th hour, as in the first couple hours.
Sure, but it's still
you're
going.
high. You are freaking high on stress biochemicals. Now, here's the point. What allows those to begin to come down? Well, it's a lovely biochemical called oxytocin, which we know as the bonding biochemical. Well, blessed are those who mourn, for they will be given the opportunity to have oxytocin. You see, you can comfort yourself, but you don't produce your own oxytocin. You need the other in order for your body to generate this wonderful biochemical that gives you a sense of connection and intimacy. So when we handle trauma by our own, let me use a hard word, our own self-righteous ways of managing pain, they work up to a point, but it doesn't change the brain. It doesn't change those neural pathways. It only confirms I'm alone, I need to take care of myself, and I will provide what I need. Well, that's a violation of every social construct, a violation ultimately of a Trinitarian God. So we need one another, but hear the next phrase. We need one another's grief. We need one another's lament, because when we hold one another in grief, and again, not resolve, not advice, not counsel, but just the ability in the Hebrew context, Jewish context, to sit Shiva, to be able to hold grief together, it literally changes our brain.
This episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. Y'all know how much I believe in BetterHelp. Not only because I'm a big believer in therapy myself, but because I've seen what not only good therapy, but what BetterHelp has done for some of my closest friends. It's so easy for us to get caught up in what everyone else needs from us and never take a moment to think about what we need from ourselves. I know this is the case, especially for someone like me that creates content that hopefully is helping people for a living. One of the last things I remember to do is to help myself. When I spend all my time giving, it leaves me feeling stretched and thinned and honestly burned out. And so for me, therapy gives me the tools to help me find more balance in my life. And I know that it can do the same for you. So if you've ever benefited from therapy, what I would love for you to do is to tell a friend about BetterHelp. And if you think that you could benefit from therapy, I have something for you. And that is BetterHelp is going to give you 10% off your first month. Listen to this. Find more balance with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/humanhope today to get 10% off your first month. That is BetterHelp, HELP.com/humanhope. I've got a question for you. Is hiring challenging for you? Yeah? Well, do you love a challenge? Sure. Okay. Well, let me tell you something. You actually could use a hiring partner that can level up the game for you. And that hiring partner is Indeed. Indeed is the hiring platform where you can attract, interview, and hire all in one place. So instead of spending hours on multiple job sites searching for candidates with the right skills, Indeed is a powerful hiring platform that can help you do it all. They actually streamline hiring with powerful tools that find you matched candidates. Like, candidates literally fill out forms that they will match with you. And even better, Indeed is the only job site where you only pay for applications that meet your must-have requirements. Indeed is an unbelievably powerful hiring platform, delivering 4 times, listen to this, 4 times more hires than all other job sites combined. And that is according to Talent Nest from 2019. Join more than 3 million businesses worldwide that use Indeed to hire great talent fast. Start hiring now with a $75 sponsored job credit to upgrade your job post at Indeed.com/humanhope. Offer good for a limited time. Claim your $75 credit now at Indeed.com/humanhope. Just go to Indeed.com/humanhope and support the show by saying you heard about it on this podcast. Indeed.com/humanhope. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed. Wow. How do you hold someone else's grief? How is that even possible? I want to rush into my friend who's experiencing trauma, and I'm Googling on the way over there 5 things to say to my friend that just got divorced, and you're telling me just to run in with whatever Greek word you just said and to sit there.
Yeah. Yeah, I was with a good friend by the name of Reggie Kidd, who used to teach New Testament at Reformed Seminary in Orlando. We're standing next to one another, and he looked at me at one point and he goes, "Are you crying more?" And I looked at him and I said, "Yeah, a lot more." And he goes, "Yeah, we're near death. We're old men, and we have so much more to grieve." And it was such a relief, literally, to have somebody ask, "Are you crying more?" "Yeah, I am. How about you?" "Yeah." Well, that simple question, let me just say, in a whole lifetime, I'm 70, in a whole lifetime, I've never had anyone ask me that question. "Are you crying more?"
Wow.
And it was sweet, connecting, but also that reality of how do we live in a insanely freaking polarized, cruel, sadistic, political, let alone ecclesial and relational realm where people are literally killing each other through words. How do we engage this without lament? So I think in that sense, justice begins with joint lament. When we can grieve together, we can move together. And that sense of, as an old white cisgendered male, how do I grieve with my BIPOC friends a world that I'm actually more responsible for creating than suffering? How do I grieve with friends whose bodies and internal struggles are so different than mine? And I think you come back to a phrase that's just staggering when Paul just throws this out like it's no big thought. Grieve with those who grieve. Weep with those who weep. Rejoice with those who rejoice. Can we tune our emotional orientation to joining one another? Irrespective of what the cause is, can we join? And I think that's one of the great challenges of a traumatic world where we isolate and end up, in many ways, becoming even more independent and self-righteous than we were before the harm.
And that isolation is that I think the third piece of trauma that you were talking about, that is where we go and we feel, I'm doing some research for my next book, and the book is about technology and our souls and our relationship with technology. But suddenly through my research, it's more turning into a book about loneliness and just how we're the most connected we've ever been in the history of humanity, but we are lonelier and more isolated than we've ever been. So that last piece is the isolation actually, quadrupling the amount of trauma and what is happening to us. Talk to us a little bit about the isolation piece.
Well, I love that you're working on that. And, the reality is technology gives you more opportunity to quote unquote be like God than anything else, because I can be with friends in Ukraine in the sense of I have something close to omniscience. I have something close to omnipresence. And I don't have omnipotence, but I have the counterfeit of it. So that reality of I can be anywhere with anyone virtually at any time with some degree of at least perceived, if not foolishly illusionary power. Put all that together, and whenever you attempt to be like God, you're in a realm of delusion. You have truly cut yourself off from reality in some form. So when we cut ourselves off from the reality that we're creatures, not creators, creatures, and therefore I don't have the authority that the Creator has. I end up becoming, and again, I don't want to just throw a word out, but we become, even if we're not personally, we get into the river of narcissism, where nothing is more important at some level than me, my rights, my authority, my own feeling, and all of a sudden, we become isolated islands of narcissism, cut off because we presumed the same power that Eve had and Adam had when they ate the fruit, to be like God. And you go, that's not a good thing, to attempt to be that which I'm not.
Yes, and I think at that point, you know, it's almost like we're accidentally becoming narcissists. Like nobody's like being like, today I'm going to be a narcissist, but I'm not going to be a narcissist, but I am, going to film every facet of my life today, put it out there so that you can tell me how amazing my life is. And I accidentally became a narcissist, but man, it feels good. Yeah. I mean, that feels good.
If you've ever been caught in a river, where all of a sudden, you're wading out 4 or 5 feet, and all of a sudden the current takes you out, your feet out. And you don't want to be, it's dangerous, but you're in the flow. And I feel like that's a good example. Accidental narcissism is you just got taken out, but now you're in it. You got to work really hard to get yourself out of that particular flow.
Yes. No, it is a lot harder. And then your waders fill up, and then it's over. Then your accidental narcissism has killed you.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, I wasn't planning on going here, but I want to go back to something that you said, because I think that just various points of views on this could be very helpful. You were talking about how we are in this deeply polarized, ugly, divisive climate and culture, and we go back to what Paul was saying: mourn with those who mourn, rejoice with those who rejoice. And I don't know, I don't read Greek. I'm not skilled in reading the Bible in different languages, but I don't think it says mourn with those that mourn, that vote like you, look like you, think like you, love like you, talk like you. I don't think it says be joyful with those who look like you, think like you, vote like you. So suddenly I feel like we're actually being called to do this. If we cut it in half, then we're not fulfilling the truth of that calling.
Yes.
How, Dan, do you, or how do we, or how have you seen it done well, where it is possible to mourn with those who mourn, that you may vehemently disagree with their points of view in, socioeconomic challenges or whatever it may be? Talk to us about it, a little bit about that.
Well, it's such an important question. And again, it's where that whole core sense of who are we and what are we for? And look, when I say who are we, when I say we are beloved creatures, we are beloved children of God, which always comes with that word adoption. I'm adopted. And in that, I have all the rights and privileges therein appertaining. However, in one sense, it is not a natural, shall we say, ease that I am just the biological children of God. So knowing you're adopted, it puts you in the position of this, I know trauma. My body knows trauma. Even if you were 1 day old when you were adopted, you know trauma. Something of the world hasn't worked. So when we open that door to the reality that who I am is holding this word beautiful and broken. I'm from a broken world, and I'm made in the image of God. Like, I'm more beautiful than the Grand Canyon. Now that's a very strong statement. But the Grand Canyon's not made in the image of God, though it's a really amazing hole in the dirt. So when we hold this complexity about who we are, it means we can hold the complexity of one another. You're a broken man. You're a beautiful man. I've heard you a number of times on the podcast. I love how you engage. So the reality is, if we can hold what's true of ourselves, I think we can hold better what's true of others. We are deeply broken. We are deeply beautiful. And one doesn't cancel the other out.
Right.
So why would I be surprised that you're stunning? Why would I be surprised that you can be a poop? If we're on my podcast, I would say it a little differently. But let's just say that reality we can hold together. And yet, in holding it now, what I get to be amazed by is that I get to actually learn from. I get to receive from you because of the beauty and goodness of your life. I get to give to you what's true of my own beauty and goodness. So there is this generosity that comes when we understand who we are. And yet the question is, what are we made for? And I get too brief to say it, but we're made to give glory to God. We're made, whether we eat or drink, which the most basic things in life, eating and drinking, we're meant to eat in a way where we celebrate, where we party, where we play, where we have joy together. But that means if I know joy with you, then I also know heartache with you. Yeah. And that ability to weep together and to be able to laugh together is what it means to eat well for the glory of God in one another's beauty and brokenness, in which case it is good. Now, again, I am not a Trump Republican, never have been, never will be. And so when I'm with my Trump Republican friends, we have tension. We have tension, and it ain't thin. It is thick, very thick. Right. But here's the difference, and that is, at least with some of my friends, we still weep together and we still laugh together. And that is what holds us, oxytocin bond together when there are strong differences. Now, in that play, it's going to require us to continue to be deeply attuned to one another, to hold one another, but also be rapid in the repair, and rapid in the repair, to be able to say that who I voted for president, you think is a communist. Who you voted for president, I think is an anarchist. All right. Yes. So now we've got really deep, different views about America. And are we both committed to the kingdom of God? And is the kingdom of God America? I don't think so. And even my Trump Republican friends, even though it's hard for them to say, they actually would say that the kingdom of God is not the same as America. Yes. I opened my Bible yesterday. I couldn't find it. I couldn't find America anywhere in there. So, I appreciate everybody getting to at least that theological viewpoint. That's just so beautiful, but being quick to repair, I think that's the thing that we've forgotten is actually possible. I think so many of us are walking around going like, well, the last 3 years just jacked up my relationship with my friend that I was friends with for 20 years. And used to see what they're posting on Facebook, but the repair is possible, but it's going to take sacrifice. And I tell people that all the time, like, it's going to take you sacrificing just as much as you want them to sacrifice, but it's hard. It's hard. Curiosity. Again, if there is this shared sense of we can weep and laugh together, then there's a greater curiosity. And that is some of my divergent political friends. I respect them and their thinking, not their decisions, notice. But I want to hear how they've come to a particular decision. And that, shall we say, that labyrinth-like process of hearing another person's way of thinking, we're talking about labor, meaning it doesn't happen over a text. It doesn't happen even over a phone call. Back to this notion of food, drink, time, Like if you're not eating and drinking with friends, even the ones you differ with, then again, a meal that lasts longer than the average American meal right now lasts 12 minutes.
What?
I mean,
I act surprised, but it's true. Yeah.
90 years ago, the figure is something along the lines of between an hour and 2 hours, maybe 90 minutes. Well, that's where discussion, conversation, political debate, spiritual formation occurred. Dinner table, because it's the most intimate place for engagement other than sexuality in the proverbial bedroom. So why would we think that fast food and quick conversations, text messages, are any means to deal with the human heart? They aren't.
Y'all know what time it is. It's time to feed my gigantic 125-pound Bernese Mountain Dog. And why I love to feed my dog is because what I know is going into its belly, into its pie hole, is some good stuff. Sundays. Sundays is the healthy dog food that's actually easy to store and serve. And it makes you feel so good about feeding Rome and Hawk Sundays. Sundays is air-dried dog food made from a short list of human-grade ingredients. Sundays was co-founded by Dr. Tori, a practicing veterinarian. Listen to this. Sundays contains 90% meat. That's a lot of meat. 10% vegetables and 0% synthetic nutrients. Besides USDA beef and all-natural chicken, you'll find digestive aids like pumpkin, ginger, plus disease-fighting antioxidants. I mean, y'all, listen, I'm about to eat some Indeed myself because that sounds amazing. I love how much my dogs devour Sundays every single time that I pour it in their bowls. It's affordable. It costs 40% less than other healthy dog food brands out there because they don't waste money on shipping or frozen packages. Nope. And listen, we worked out a special order or deal for our dog-loving listeners. Get 35% off your first order of Sundays. Go to sundaysfordogs.com/humanhope or use code humanhope at checkout. That's sundaysfordogs.com/humanhope. Upgrade your pup to Sundays and feel good about the food you feed your dog. Holy cow. I wish this freaking podcast could be 15 hours. I'm just going to have to keep bringing you back on my podcast because you're so much fun. This is really helpful. I do want to turn a corner here and maybe land in this direction as people are hearing this conversation. They're like, okay. All right, Carlos, Dan, like I'm closing my, hopefully I'm not while I'm driving, but I'm closing my eyes and I'm thinking, okay, the trauma has happened. Yes, you're right. Like I get it. Not only has it happened in my childhood, but it's happening right now. What do I do now? Like, okay, like I see myself in isolation. I see myself numbing. I see myself doing these things. What practically can somebody do to begin to find their way out or begin to deal with what happened to them 15, 20 years ago?
Yeah. Well, the first thing is get a freaking pen. Get a pen. Now, I don't personally like pencils, so I just can't say that. Get a pen and a pad of paper. Okay. And what happens is the portion of our brain, and when I said that, I didn't say your computer. What we've known is that your ability to put thoughts down on paper is an intersection between what we call the limbic brain and the cortical brain, between our thinking and feeling brain. So one of the things that just seems too simple is, would you write yourself a note? Would you not a list, like a to-do list, but a note like, okay, you've heard some of this podcast and you've got a memory of 8th grade being in the locker room and humiliated by older boys. It came back. Yeah. All right, just write it down. Like locker
the story,
room.
Just write that story down?
Just even like locker room.
Even just the place, yeah.
Just like a couple of phrases. And then maybe that's going to be all you can do. And then you go, well, but an hour a day later, write 5 to 10 sentences. Now you can see the progression. Once you begin to put a little bit of language, your brain begins to change. What we know about the brain is this lovely phrase, neuroplasticity, which basically is a way of saying your brain can change. It can literally change. But I have to have the courage to, in one sense, return to where the trauma occurred, context, to the people in the trauma, characters, to the plot of the trauma, meaning the movement from A to B to C to D, some of the dialogue. And what often people say is, but I don't remember. And the answer is, well, you knew enough to say locker room and humiliation. So you can imagine. You don't have to have exact memory, but you can begin to imagine some of what likely got said to you as you're aware that your body as a boy was being humiliated. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out what got named, what got said, how you felt. As you begin to write what will feel to some degree like fiction, because you don't have all the details. You're actually connecting at least to a portion of what occurred. Now, we're not in a court of law. You don't have to hold your hand up and say the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. But you're beginning to reclaim literally brain territory by end engagement. So put it most simply, you can't change what you don't name. But naming, that naming isn't just an intellectual, like an investigational. It's, will you put yourself in the position of what that 8-year-old felt? And again, this is maybe for some people pretty weird to hear this. You literally got an 8-year-old in you, because those neurons, billions of neurons, configured when you were 8 to remember something of what that event was. And you're tapping into something of that neural pathway to engage. And what generally happens is there's anger or grief, meaning you begin to break down something of the facade of numbness. And in that grieving, this is, again, naming, owning, feeling. But here's the key word. In the context, eventually, of somebody who can hold those stories with you. And that's a good therapist, a good friend who's, in one sense, further on the path of story redemption than you might be. So it can be a spiritual director. It can be a coach. It can be a good therapist, a pastor. It just needs to be a human being who may be just a little bit more mature than you, who's going to engage your life.
Are you saying, Dan, that I can't go to Chat GPT, and just put in like, hey, can you tell me how to get better? And then the AI can like help me. It's got to be an actual living, breathing human. That's awesome.
That's scary. I mean, just even that thought is like,
no. He yells it. Grab a freaking pen, okay? And listen, we don't want to like create division. If you're a pencil lover, you can grab a pencil as well. We don't want to stand on issues. We'll walk with people. We'll walk with the pencil people. I'm a pen guy too.
It's like cats and dogs on that one.
Yes. No, it is. It's like cats and dogs. But no, that is I think that is very helpful. The first step doesn't have to be Googling a therapist, in your area. Just open up your journal and write it down. Gosh. Yeah. That's very helpful. You are, you live, where do you live? Where am I even talking to you from right now? Where are you at?
I live near Seattle on a lovely little island called Bainbridge Island.
Okay. Is that where I'm looking at you on my screen right now?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So you're on Bainbridge Island, but you're part of. Is it the Seattle School of
Theology and Psychology?
Theology.
Yeah.
Oh, Seattle. Okay, Theology and Psychology, and you have a program there, at where you help people. I would assume students that are wanting to help other people work through trauma, these things. One thing I do want to ask you is, are there places? Yeah, I do know a lot of people that walk this tension between, oh yeah, I'm on the inner healing prayer team at my church, but I also have a psychology degree, or I desire to like really look into the psychology side of things, but also I'm a believer in the supernatural side of things. Are there places besides it's Seattle that help people and can train people to walk through these things?
Oh, that's a painful question. I'm dear friends with John Eldridge.
Good. I'm glad I asked it.
Wild at Heart Ministries, I'm very, very fond of. You and I know, at least in the Nashville area, Al Andrews. There are individuals, there are groups. On site, I believe, is just a beautiful, beautiful place. So let's just say the divisions between spheres. There is a division in the sense between talking about our body versus talking about our inner world. And yet, we're the same person. And the same way we can talk about our relationship with God, that's affecting our body. Bad theology is bad for your body.
Yes.
And so in that sense, the distinctions should never be divisions. They should be opportunities for more curiosity from a perspective, like facets of a diamond. You don't look at the diamond and go, I don't like that facet. It's not part of the diamond. And you go, oh, really? Well, it kind of looks like it is. And so in the same way, I believe when I work with deeply harmed human beings or subtly abused human beings, that there's a spiritual dimension. Evil loves trauma. So how can I engage the reality of our own structure relationally without being aware that evil has a plan and it wants to thieve, it wants to steal and kill and mar. So all I can say is I hope that there will be a growing, I don't like the word integration, but a growing play and honor between spheres that opens the door to a heightened level of maturity and sophistication in dealing with the human condition.
Absolutely. That is very well put. And I'm hoping for that as well. And I'm also hoping that you really feel appreciated and loved, because I am so grateful that you took the time just to unpack some of these things that I think is going to be really helpful for my listeners. Thank you, Dan.
Well, my honor again. Thank you.
Yeah.